Okay. Hello, ladies. How do I work on, because I know you'll be good at this one, Evelyn. How do I work on building the skill? Sometimes I have to do things I don't want to do. My 13-year-old has it in his brain that except from school, he doesn't need to do anything he doesn't like. For example, make his lunch, go outside, get fresh air, spend time with his family. We have let him have his way a few times, and now he thinks that's how it should always be. He's very content sitting on the couch with his iPad. He's homeschooled and doesn't have friends. He says no to almost every suggestion, and we end up forcing him out of the house sometimes, and he will say he had fun. We live in a beautiful state with lots to do, and thank you. And I'm sending this parent a hug because I think we've all been there in some way, some shape, or form. But Evelyn Kung is here and she knows things. So tell us things.
Well, let me just say, I love kids like this.
Yeah.
They are so smart. They've figured out how to make their world work. And if all of us could get away with only doing the things that we liked,
I'd do it.
yeah, we would try. But we have this social understanding out there, the need for independence, the need to want new things, try new things, be stimulated in other ways. We get bored. And I would say for a kid like this, you really actually need to go back and do an assessment of all the skills that he has, because there's definitely information that's missing. And usually the information that's missing is in the area of what we call cognition or perspective taking, emotional understanding, that whole aspect, and then executive functioning, understanding what's important, understanding how to prioritize things, understanding just how to organize yourself. And all of that is really hard for a lot of people. I mean, research is showing that one of the professors wrote a book about how adolescence in males doesn't end until they're 25, because that's the prefrontal part of your brain that, executive function skills need to develop, and it needs all that time for some people and apparently for a large group of people. And, when you're missing information, then you're going to make decisions that don't make sense to the people around you. And a lot of for our kids that have this kind of skill, just by the little information that you gave me, saliency is a really big one, not understanding what's actually important. If you live in a world where everything has equal importance, of course, you're just going to pick and choose the things that you want because you like those things and you're just going to ignore everything else. And, there's, the fact that he's able to do school, and that is a rule that he has learned, is great, except that just means that school probably has given him rules about what's important and the order it is. But in your home life, maybe that hasn't been so clearly stated. And then now that he's older, he's had 13 years of not abiding by those rules. So now you're introducing them at age 13, and he's just like, well, no, I've gotten this far this way, so why do things have to change now? And because a lot of our kids don't like change as it is. So the fact that you've let them do things for 13 years, he has in his brain, he's probably made it a rule, because our kids our ASD kids, they're so great when you give them a rule, but what people don't understand is you give them a rule and they think it lasts forever. And maybe you're only giving them a rule for that one situation at that moment of time. But the idea is that you grow and develop, and like right now you aren't, I can make your lunch for you, but later on, you have to learn to make your own lunch because maybe you want to live by yourself. And when they don't see that timeline and they're not observing and learning the way other people do, all of that just doesn't make sense. You're just giving them these extra rules that just he doesn't like and he'd rather not abide by. And it's because he's missing a lot of social information. And that's why you need to go back and you need to start assessing, does he know how to problem solve? Can he understand a cause and effect situation? Can he make inferences? Understanding, if I don't do this now, what does that mean for later on in life? That type of learning, it does not come natural for our very black and white ASD learners. So there is a lot of information that still is probably missing from his repertoire, even if he talks a lot. A lot of times kids come in and people are like, oh, yeah, they talk a lot. They're fine. And I'm like, no, they just don't have the right words a lot of times. And giving them the right words starts teaching them how to understand the gray, that life is a continuum. It's not just one way or another. You kind of move back and forth between every on every level, and you have to understand those small changes that happen. And you have to understand socially that as you get older, you become responsible for more too. And if they're missing all of that information, then the rules that you give just don't make sense. And they've been able to do things this other way, early on. So they just take that as a rule as forever. And then, so that's the teaching that needs to go on. There's a lot of missing components in teaching a child how to go through all of that. And, I have to say, like, even though you haven't said this, the lack of understanding of what authority means needs to start being met or being talked about, because they won't understand it right away, because authority changes depending on who you're with, where you're at, and what's going on. And in school, it's very clear what the authority is. But outside of that, in the community, there's not a lot of clear rules. It really does change by who's there. And that's usually probably the most dangerous aspect, when they don't understand what authority means. And but to understand authority, you have to understand a lot of other basic things socially too, about the environment, who and what and how things function, and how things change depending on who you're with. And that is a lot of teaching. So I would encourage you that you need to go step back and try to figure out what the deficits are first, with the more simple aspects of life, and then slowly build upon them, so that you can get to the point where they understand why they have to make their own lunch, or why they have to learn to make their own lunch, And but until those holes are filled in, it's really hard for a lot of our kids. It just doesn't make sense. I've had a lot of frustrated teenagers come in and say, like, I don't know why I have to do this. And I'm just like factually showing them, you're not always going to be 13. You're not always going to be living at home. Aren't there things that you want to do? Because if there's things that you want to do, these are all the things that are needed to get to that point. And so that it's just more clearly mapped out for them. And then it gives them reason to learn how to do some of these other things daily, because then they're looking for that goal or that reinforcer that's coming along.
I love that you're talking about all this stuff, because I think it's so important. And I've seen the difference from parents who really take this to heart with a 13-year-old and really start, filling their bucket with all these skills to get them ready for that later on, and having them do chores and, volunteer places and get those pre-employment kind of skills happening, and try other leisure activities and things like that. Because I've seen what happens when they don't, and then they just keep, how often do we get the question from, I remember the one mom who wrote in and said, how do I get my adult daughter, all she does is sit on a chair all day long and stir her coffee, and she's not doing anything else. And my heart goes out, because I, I think it's really critical that we acknowledge the fact that even though our kids are on the spectrum, they're still 13-year-olds when they're 13 in a lot of ways. And the movie that helped me the most, and I encourage all parents to go and watch it again, is that Disney movie. Is it called Inside Out? The one where they're all the emotions live in their head and have characters. But the thing that really hit home for me, and Jem was just about turning 13 when that movie came out, and I had an opportunity actually to interview the people who made the movie, Pete Docter, and I can't think what the other gentleman's name is, but they were saying that the reason why they made the movie is because one of them, their child was going through that 13-year-old thing, and it was like joy took a back seat. They had gone through all this time being joyful, 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 and that joy took a back seat, and they wanted to better understand it. And I mean, I think it's a great movie for everybody, but I think for a caregiver to watch that when your child is around 13, to have an understanding of things in their head are shifting and going different places, and they don't quite, even if they're on the spectrum, a lot of times they don't fit, they feel that they don't fit into the little kid stuff, but they still want to do it. And it creates this whole thing. So I applaud this parent. I think it's really important that they listen to all the things that you just said, Evelyn. In a minute, we're going to talk about skills and how you can access some things and skills for free this week that might be of help. But I especially want to acknowledge the thing about, when she said we take him places and he doesn't want to go, but then he says he had a good time. I had to motor my son through a lot. And it might take 2 hours. I'd say we're going to a festival and he'd go, I don't want to go. I'm playing a video game. And he didn't know what a festival was, didn't know whether he would like it. So why would he leave the video game? And it might take me 2 hours to get him in the car to go to the festival. But I would always hear the same thing. That was great. Why don't we do more things like that?
Well, yeah. And you have the innate understanding from an ASD person is change. They don't like change. They like things that are the same, but you don't want to, since they don't know how to reach out. If you just understand that any new thing is going to be something that they don't want, then you can get past it because if you get there, you might really like it. It's just that initial, like the idea of doing something different is not interesting or not, something that they in their head think about. But that's the role of as the family and as the caregiver is just like, hey, I know you're going to hate this at first, but once we're there, you might like it. And since you know your child the best, and parents are the best experts on their own child, once you get them past that negativity, they're going to be fine with it. And there's a lot of us like that. If we go to another country, there's a lot of people that don't want to leave this country, or even for me, I love traveling. I'll go somewhere and sometimes I'll be like, do I want to go do that? That I don't know anything about, or do I want to go do something that I have some idea about? Sometimes it takes a little push to get me to try that new thing because it does require some effort. And it's worth it completely.
Thanks for watching Autism Live. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.